Welcome to the UpLevel Podcast, Jossie.
Hey, Christy.
I have my self-love club t-shirt on, so folks who are just listening from the audio, I'm wearing this in honor of you and as a testament to the journey I've witnessed you take. And folks have heard your bio and all the education and certificates and the purpose behind your work. And I've shared a little bit about our relationship, but I'm so grateful that you were born, first of all. And I'm so grateful that you're coming to spread right relationship context in the realm of mental health, because we know that people are suffering really, really, really bad right now. And so I wanted you here. It's May is Mental Health Awareness Month. And today your book launches. Claim Your Brain. Wow. Okay, so we have so many places to go, and in the energy of celebration, let's start with this. Joss, what is right relationship in the context of mental health?
Yeah, I've put some thought into this, and it really is the model that we have created from my own experience of navigating mental health. And right relationship in mental health starts with ourselves. It starts with our social well-being, our relationship with ourselves. And when that is compromised or out of alignment in right relationship to, everything else that's happening in our lives, there is suffering and there is struggle. Also in that circle is our relationship with other. So the starting point of self and then interpersonal relationships. When we aren't aligned with ourselves, our relationships are suffering or struggling. And in that context, mental health has a ripple effect. So from self to other and then throughout. And then in the model in the book, the outside circle, or we call it the giant hug around the entire model, is the spiritual well-being piece. It's like the bigger picture. And that could be connection to nature. It could be our ability to oscillate from like self, very, very micro, internally focused, into something macro or bigger picture that we're all here and a part of and living together. And so right relationship in mental health is that oscillation and ability to oscillate from our own micro moments of struggle and suffering into the macro, whether that's a relationship between two people, a family, a team inside an organization, a community, a humanity at this point in trajectory in our life. And then the bigger thing, like we don't even know what's happening out there. There's so much possibility. And when we can take our brains from the micro to the macro, we have a huge opportunity to repair our mental health or take better care of it.
That's a beautiful context around mental health and right relationship. How do you define mental health? What's the definition you work with?
Yeah. So the definition that we work with around mental health is it's a whole person approach to our well-being. It involves our brain, yes, our cognitive thinking center, our thoughts, our consciousness. It also involves our heart, our emotions, our feeling-based self. It also involves our gut, our intuition, our nervous system, and the most recent research with the gut-brain connection. Everything we're consuming inside of our bodies communicates with our brain. So the heart, the brain, the gut, and the nervous system. And mental health is the nervous system. And we know that gets programmed beginning in the womb. And so when we think about heart, brain, gut, nervous system, that is what mental health is. And that is how we consider mental health. And so it's like, how do we take care of this whole human self in order to create more thriving conditions more often? Because it's also not about always being one way.
Yeah.
And it's not about illness or wellness in two ends of the spectrum, because there's an entire spectrum of being between ill-being or well-being. And mental health oscillates on that spectrum. And it's like, how do we um, fortify our heart, our brain, our gut, our nervous system in order to be able to recover from life more often, and with better ability?
Okay. Well, natural place to go is to ask you, how do we do that? But before we do, let's talk about what had you pursue really designing and co-creating this model and stepping into this work in the way that you are. What's the origin story there, Joss?
Hmm. Well, you've lived it with me.
So lucky I have.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And this is true for most humans. We all have this story. So this one is mine. Um, but it begins in childhood. And so the reason for the creation of this model, the reason for this book, is because I, since a young age, have been navigating my own mental health challenges. And it hasn't been until very recently that I have felt I have the tools and resources in order to take good care of my mental health. So it starts with, um, some folks may have heard about adverse childhood experiences and the impacts that they have on our programming. And it's uh, an experience that a child has that really sticks with them. So depending on, the level of experience, whether it's abuse or addiction, or the range could be just to, childhood bullies. So people will experience these types of things. And for my story, it was an adverse childhood experience when my parents separated when I was a young girl, that really started to program my nervous system into, avoiding things like avoiding anger or avoiding conflict, because it was a conflicting situation that started. And so then there was a suppression
Yeah.
of feeling, of emotion in myself, and no fault of anyone's. It's just how I started to internalize life.
Hmm.
So that's the starting point. And then from there, it really went into um, hormones, like women and hormones. And I've learned more about this as I've been navigating my own journey. And it's talked about in terms of the three P's for women's mental health: puberty, pregnancy, and perimenopause, all as really marked times in a woman's journey where hormones are shifting, and everybody also has their own experiences with that. So in my teenage years, I had a really hard time like navigating depression and my hormones, which obviously was a real struggle. And then also just navigating like, feeling like I was saying things to people, but nobody was listening to me,
Hmm.
and feeling unheard. And that carried on through my whole life up until about a decade ago, where I felt like I was saying things, but I didn't feel like I was being heard. So there was a lot of suffering in that for me, and a lot of internalization of my own feelings and emotions from there. And then with all of that, it's the inner dialogue started. So then it's like a my inner dialogue up until, yeah, maybe a decade ago, was so negative. It was self-abusive. And so being able to, have the neuroplasticity of changing thought, or the neuroplasticity of changing emotion, it have all been marked experiences in, me navigating my mental health journey.
Hmm. Ah,
And it continues.
right. I mean, this is
Carry on.
well, and it's when what you've been able to do is to make your mess your message, and to turn pain into purpose, and to all of the education you've taken yourself through, you've invested in yourself for your healing and for your growth. And then you are like co-creating it in a way that you can reshare it with folks and supporting people in a very unique way. And true living is such a beautiful expression of your journey. And in the book, so folks get the pre-order book today. The link is live. You go deeper into the past story. And like, I love how you're framing it in these different phases of life, because I think most of us, chunk it down in these like 7-year chunks to really pull out what were the main things that happened that impacted maybe my self concepts and how I talk to myself, coping mechanisms, how we manage stress, how we manage turmoil, family dynamics and drama. So thanks for doing the work, sister. Thanks for doing the work and then packaging up the way you have in such a beautiful, accessible way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, thank you. And I think there was something that you just said that is actually in the book, and it's a concept that you introduced me to, and I did some deeper research into it, as the 7-year cycles, and how it's an indigenous principle, and it's also found throughout lots of different practices, or communities globally. And also from a scientific perspective, like we regenerate cells, you know, in
Yep.
cycles of 7.
Right.
Yeah. So that's part of one of the sections, is that piece around the different 7 years. So from 1 to 7 and then 7 to 14, what are all of the things that could have impacted your mental health in a positive or a negative way, and became some of the programming and conditioning that creates an environment where we're not thriving.
Let's just pause a little bit, like around those like formative years, like actually 14 to 21, because we were, um, I mean, if it's okay, I will just say to people, we were drinking a lot of alcohol during those formative years. And we were definitely, I can speak to myself that I was working so hard. It was the beginning of a coping mechanism of the way I handled stress that was in my household. Was I would wake up, do homework, go to the gym, go to school, go to my job, sleep, get up and do it again. So like this like ability to hold a lot, but it was a coping mechanism so that because what was happening in the household at the time was too intense to sit with and deal with. So like what do you want to add to that part? Because we were very much in each other's lives during those formative years where a lot of our coping mechanisms were built.
Hmm. Yeah. Um, yeah. In those years, that was the coping mechanism. Like for me personally, I went in that era was like escape. What are all the things I can do to escape myself? What's happening for me?
Yeah.
And alcohol, drugs, and I quickly pivoted in and out of those, and also moving too quickly, like you
Hmm.
just talked about.
Yeah.
That's been a theme for my entire life up until 4 years ago.
Yeah.
Um, when I had a cycling accident and a brain injury, but I was moving so quickly that it was like, I don't know where I was rushing to, but I was in a rush. Everything was a rush, and
Yeah.
that was my coping mechanism. We fast tracked through high school, so
Yeah.
I was moving quickly to get through that. It's like, and then all of the escapes. And I think when I reflect back, there's so many beautiful things that came out of it, but in the moment, that quick movement, that rush, 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 that get to the next thing, um, was the way that I dealt with everything. And, in my life, when we talk about the misuse of alcohol as a society, um, that's been an experience for me, misuse of alcohol in loved ones very close to me. So whether it was from, uh, family members or people I knew and loved dying from alcohol and addiction, or it was simply because they were lost in their own suffering. Um, that's been a really real experience for me. And that's a part of the right relationship, is that when we're out of integrity or alignment, or integration with our whole true healthy selves, that has a ripple effect and it impacts others. So we have a responsibility, if we have the means and tools and resources, to do the work that I've been doing.
Yeah. Yeah. And thanks for that. The piece around being in right relationship with like these substances and how they not only impact us, but the folks that we're sharing spaces and projects and responsibilities with, whether it's raising children, taking care of homes, running businesses, workplaces. It is really important. And you mentioned that it was like 10 years ago that you found like you really got your voice. It was like a turning point. What happened 10 years ago? And I know that this is in the book, but let's get a little ditty out here on the UpLevel podcast, Jossie.
Yeah. So 10 years ago, well, first of all, I started with coaching because the reason that I wanted to go and do coach training was because I felt like I needed better tools to communicate, because I was like, nobody is listening to me. Nobody's hearing me. I'm talking and I'm asking for what I need and it's not coming back to me. So what am I doing wrong? And that was a common message in my life. What am I doing wrong? Where have I gone wrong?
Mm.
How can I fix this? And like it brings that level of self-blame.
Yeah.
That's painful.
It's super painful. Yeah.
And I also think that that's a contributor of mental health. And I don't, that just like, it's me. Something's wrong with me.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with anybody who's struggling.
Yeah.
So when I pull back from my emotion, and 10 years ago, it was to communicate.
Yeah.
And what I didn't realize is that I was going to learn how to communicate with myself better.
Mm-hmm.
And then that was going to have a ripple effect. So back to the ripple effect
Mm-hmm.
part of the conversation. And then I had a 4-year-old, 4 years old, 8 years old, or 4 years old, 6 years old, 8 years old. Anyways, my kids were young. They were little bunnies.
Little babies. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was really struggling with motherhood and how to have purpose in the world as well as be a mom. And then I found myself navigating a super traumatizing divorce. And those days leading into this time frame in my life were the darkest. Those were the days where I wished I was in inpatient care for mental health, where someone could literally, like, I wanted to exchange my brain because it was all me. Like I was wrong, something was going wrong. And so that part is where I really catapulted into this work that I'm doing and turning my pain into purpose, which is part of one of the chapters, is
Mm-hmm.
how do you turn pain into purpose? Because we have to, or else we'll stay suffering in our mental health.
And you've done it in such a way that there's been zero bypassing. You have not taken the easy path, my dear sister. You have thrown your full self into being able to say, I turned my pain into my purpose. It's not just a great line or a chapter in your book.
Mm-hmm.
You have been friggin' steadfast. Like you've been a warrior in your healing journey. And then when it wasn't enough, the outside world took you out again and said, you, lady, are going to change everything. And you had the biking accident 4 years ago. Like, I mean, that was, whew.
Mm-hmm.
Then
Yeah.
the accelerate. I just want to say the acceleration the past 4 years with your courage to decelerate. So there's a paradox. You had no choice but to slow down. Your brain was not able to function at the pace it was before. So you had to slow down. I should let you tell this story. I'm like, Jocelyn's story. It's so good. I've been right here the whole time, but it is. Okay, I'm just gonna say this and then turn the mic back to you. So it's like you have accelerated so much in the past 4 years because you let yourself take the foot off the brake. I mean, life made you take your foot off the brake. So yeah, what do you want to say about that?
Yeah. So 4 years ago, for listeners, I had a traumatic brain injury. I turned to triathlon as my place of solace and healing and freedom because I love exercise and it keeps me mentally sane and stable. And I love nature. I love being outside. And it was all those things. And so I turned to triathlon to be a place of healing and restoration and regeneration. And I was training one morning and found myself unconscious on the side of the road because I had blacked out before I could reach my brakes and I went headfirst into the ground. So now I'm not only on a journey of my mind and my body and all the things we talked about on what is mental health. I'm on a journey of healing my brain physically from the neuroinflammation, from the invisible symptoms of traumatic brain injury, which people typically don't understand, just like many people don't understand what it's like to suffer in their mental health if they don't themselves. So that part of the journey was me willing myself awake on the side of the road when the ambulance attendants were putting me on a spine board and immobilizing my neck. And all I could remember was like trying to move my fingers and my toes and asking if I was okay, like literally checking to see if I was paralyzed from the neck down. And that, yeah, the universe stopped me. It was like, okay, you can't keep going. We're going to stop you because you're not listening. And that's when I bring in the spiritual piece. It's if we don't slow down, from our mind or from the mental push, we'll get slowed down by something. Yeah, sickness, an accident, a death. Something's going to slow us down and we'll get the message that we need. And it gets louder and louder every time. So I actually don't remember what the actual question was, but that was the moment.
No.
And that's, the slowing down was like, I have catapulted. And that accident happened at the same time I had registered to do my master's, which I ended up having to put on hold because my brain wasn't physically working. Like I could do one thing at a time and I had 3 busy kids. So I could either be a mom to my kids, I could work, or I could exercise, or I could drive. I couldn't do any of those things all in the same day. And it's just regaining some level of capacity these days, but it's still way less than what I was operating at before.
Mm-hmm. So there's, first of all, I love you. And I'm so glad that the accident wasn't worse than it was. And I know that you've suffered a lot through it and you've made your pain your purpose. So it's like, fuck yeah. And so this is where the thread of right relationship comes back in, because I think a lot of our listeners can relate to, there's an awareness of, I need to change something, or, I have a behavior that I now know is not in my highest interest, but I keep doing it for whatever reason, coping mechanisms, wounds, trigger. I mean, like, hey, we're human. And if we don't do it, then life does it for us. And one of the things I want people to walk away, like from all of the right relationship conversations, is that nature has a way of restoring balance. Like it's always doing it. Now that I'm living literally inside the jungle, I'm watching it every day. And we are nature. We are nature. And if we're not finding that equilibrium, something in our external world will force us to find it. And it can be brutal and painful. And it's just, we want people to consider, like, where am I now? What is something that might be out of harmony, out of alignment, whether it's a value that I keep trampling or a value of mine that someone else is trampling, or I just know, like, I know for me, one of the things I'm doing is I am uh I've been building this home in Costa Rica, and my coping mechanism is to work really hard when I'm overwhelmed. So there's been this pattern of, well, I'll just work harder so I can generate more revenue so I can take care of it. Right. And it's not sustainable. It can't go on. So there's like a restoration and a responsibility I need to take to bring that into alignment and to stop the shit before life does it for me.
Yeah. And when I think about nature, it's like if there's too much heat, there's too much sun, we have wildfires. If there's too much rain, too much precipitation, snow, wherever you live, you have flooding. Like catastrophe happens when there's too much of something and it happens within us. And like from a cellular level, I had too much emotional suppression and it had nowhere to go. So when like back to your point of harmony and equilibrium and right relationship, we we get cues. So from my story, it's intuition and ignoring it. Like when you're ignoring your intuition, you're gonna keep getting cues and it's gonna feel funky or you're gonna, when you're ignoring your intuition and you just don't align with it or follow it, like you feel that energetically. And if you try to push through it, it will be painful. So that guided intuition and listening to it, but we can't do that when we're busy, when we're not fueling ourselves well, when we're over capacity, or it's just easier to do it, or it comes from a place of fear. Because there's a huge part of my story is where I've been, just living in a fear based mindset versus an abundant based mindset. And the fear part is what can keep people stuck: fear of the unknown, fear of losing control, fear of the repercussion. And then that can generate, a state of suffering internally, is really being driven by the fear mind versus the mind of love and trust that everything is going to work out and it will all be okay because, yeah, there's no questioning happening out there in nature. It's happening.
It is. It is flowing. It is happening. And yeah, one of the themes of all these conversations is like for people to reconnect to nature, go put your feet in the earth, go be in the water, take a walk in a forest. And, this isn't woo woo stuff. This is things our ancestors knew and did. And it is like imperative with the state of the world right now. Joss, what do you think is happening with humanity in this moment? Why are we so out of right relationship with one another, with each other, and with whatever the bigger thing is for folks?
Hmm. We're disconnected from source. Like we're disconnected from our roots. The more fast paced and modernized and technological, the more disconnected we get from our roots of like being nomadic. Having your body temperatures have to fluctuate because you're outdoors living. We're super comfy, cruising around at 70 degrees
Yeah.
Fahrenheit in air conditioning and heating. But that's, we're out of touch with that. And I feel like that's why you're starting to see saunas and cold plunges popping up,
Yeah.
is the oscillation and like the longevity that provides. We're sitting here comfy and in our comfort zone. But the disconnection from right relationship is the further we get disconnected from our place in this bigger system, our relationship with the plants, our relationship with the animals, our relationship with the sunrise and the moon. We're meant to be rising and falling with the sun and the moon as humans. And, for even like neuroscientists are talking about it, but indigenous traditions, they're all following this. And so being aligned with what's happening on the bigger perspective, what's happening in nature is imperative for our mental health, because the further disconnected, the further isolated, the further it's just me. And there's this lack of community. Like I'm even feeling it in our neighborhood and hear people talking about it. There's a lack of community. It's like, I live here, I don't talk to anybody.
Yeah.
There's less of that, like leaning into your community happening.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So
Yeah.
from that perspective of what's happening for humanity, it's this singularly focused existence, but we need to remember our place in the bigger perspective and tap into that. And yes, modern society is going to carry on, and a lot of people still have to live in it for their livelihoods and for their own well-being. But it's like, how then do you remember to connect back into our place?
Hmm. Can you give us a few like tangible practices and things that you've been doing, you've done? Maybe there are also some things you can give us a little preview of what might be in the book.
Yeah. So the book is really a lot of awareness generation. It's really meant to like inspire people to be more aware to all of the ways they're taking care of their mental health. And from a super simple perspective, uh, when you go to, let's go to the workplace. Like when you go to work, are you tunnel vision from the moment you wake up to the time you get in the car, the time you sit at your desk, and the time you get onto Zoom, and the time you answer calls, and then the time you go home? Or are you taking breaks and perspective and going outside and looking at the trees and their magnitude? Or are you going outside and sitting on a park bench? Or are you going outside and feeling your face in the sun for 90 seconds? Are you going for a walk at any point in the day? And doing that with great intention. And I think that's an important aspect of all of this, is doing more things with more intention. And in the book, we talk about from habitual, which is what I just described, to more ritual. And that is how Indigenous communities have always lived, ritualistically, with reverence for each other, their ceremonies, the land, the nature. And it's taking our day to day to do that. And then I always get the question, well, how can I slow down to do that when it's so busy? It's you don't have a choice anymore. When we choose to be habitual, we see what the results are. The mental health of humanity is suffering, and it's no longer a Western problem. When I talk about this with other cultures, it's just not talked about in other cultures. They're still suffering. It's just taboo to talk about it. And so it's like, as a species of human beings, how do we start to have more conversation, more storytelling, going back to the the ways of our ancestors,
Yeah.
and elders, and storytelling to create connection and community. So that was a long-winded answer, but it's that habitual to ritual, and incorporating more of that micro to macro oscillation in your day, of like tunnel vision versus, oh wow, look at this beautiful sunrise, or look at the moon, or look at the stars, and being more like that, because we can do that whether we live in the city or we live in the jungle.
Aho to that. May we all reconnect to this notion of habitual to ritual. And let's talk a little bit about our ancestors. So, I think the way you and I are both holding it is we are all indigenous to some land, right? We have all originated from some place.
Mhm.
And one of the things you did as a testament to this beautiful book that's coming out today is you took the time to really track your lineage and understand on both sides and get to know some of the characters and stories. And I also think some of the physical and mental and emotional health circumstances for these folks. Let's talk about the importance of people reconnecting to ancestry and how this can support to restore right relationship with our mental health.
Mm. Mhm. This was really an eye-opening journey for me, exploring my ancestry, because when I was writing the book, there's the I'll just briefly refer to it because people can get the book, but the biopsychosocial model of mental health. But the social piece is the ancestry, where it's like our lineage and the generations and what has been passed down, and what we're doing today has an impact for 7 generations to come. And so I went back as far as I could on both sides to seek to understand what was going on for my parents, and then their parents and their parents. And there was something really cathartic and healing in that, to acknowledge and recognize that there has been things passed down, and beautiful things, and then mental health challenges. And so we get the opportunity to really look and say, okay, I chose for my path to be like, I'm choosing this path, I'm choosing pain to purpose, because I want to heal, if you will, for my own children. It's also, how our family conversations are happening differently. But when I went, through my parents' lineages and understood, my grandmother was adopted and was raised by a non-nurturing single mother. And then, my dad's dad came over during the war because he didn't want to fight in the war for Italy. And he was a stowaway without papers. Like, there is so much going on, and so much that these generations have had to endure for us to be able to be here. And some may see this as like, why have children when, it's just a whole lot of suffering? And I've heard that perspective. And then others are like, what a gift, I get to be here and live this life. And that's this perspective I choose. And in that, I think, something that's important for my story as well is it really hits with a mother's mental health journey. And then, how that and ours as mothers, however you're mothering in the world, has a ripple effect too on, the future generations. And it was important for me to understand my lineages and the what was being passed down. So what was mine and what wasn't. And there was beautiful things, like my dad was very much living on the land. He's into the gardens. He's with his hands in the dirt. There's no gardening gloves, bare feet in the grass, like delivering all of that. And then, all the nurturing that I got from, my mom, and the creativity and the cooking and all those things. But there's so much to be celebrating in the generations and what's been handed down. And there's also a awareness to be like, oh wow, this isn't mine to hold. This suffering, or this level of poor feeling around my mental health, this comes from different generations that have been passed down, and I choose not to carry it forward with me. I choose not to pass that down to my children, so that they can, with intention. And so my hope is that, they'll have their own things, but I wanted to make a conscious choice of what I gave them, and, where they could be set free.
True living. You heard it here at UpLevel. True living. Jocelyn Pepe, aligned to her purpose. It's so beautiful. And I've had the great privilege of hearing your voice memos. we talk all day via voice memos. I'm sure other of you have besties that you do that. And when you were uncovering this information, it was like you were reclaiming parts of yourself. The level of healing was exponential. And then I saw you right after you read a portion of the book to your parents.
Yes.
And that was a really important, intentional part of your process. What do you want to say about that?
My whole body is vibrating from that. I feel like everyone should write their book, because the healing that came through it allowed me to release so much. So yeah, the book is broken out into 4 parts. And the first part of it is my story, and the rest of it is, tools to share that really worked for me. But I read that first part to my parents, and I was so nervous, and very intentional with how I wrote that part of this story to be about my own maladaptations, because it's not about anybody else. I learned about the other people in the story because I needed to, so I could let go of what wasn't mine. But it's not about blame or any fingers. It's about, okay, so here's how I internalize these different things. Here's what happened for me. And here's how I want to move forward. But the beauty of sharing it with my mom and dad and reading it has shifted my energy in such a beautiful way and opened up an entirely new relationship. And that in itself feels very therapeutic, and very liberating, so that I feel freer. There's a freeness inside of me that came with that part. And I'm grateful. Like, I am grateful that I have my mom and dad, because they are supportive of me and so supportive of me on this mission. And like, we're so open to hearing the story, to me sharing the story. Um, yeah, so I feel proud, because I know not everybody gets to have that experience in their family, and I acknowledge that. And I do want to take the moment for my family and feel proud for not only me doing the work, but everybody, being in the work together.
And it's been a beautiful example of like, you're a light bearer in the family of origin, and you've brought so much light to your unit. And it's been incredible to witness, as a person that has walked beside you since we were 3. And I know, like today, we're celebrating the birth of this book, and it's so much more than a book. It's like we're celebrating all of the deep healing work that's happened as a result of your courage to go first and to make your message, turn your pain into purpose. And for folks listening, who, like Jocelyn so humbly said, not everybody has that opportunity or has that context. We can still gestalt with our parents or other family members. Maybe they've passed on, or maybe we're not in relation with them, or it's just not a container where we can have those conversations. We can still have those conversations with their higher selves. This is something, that I've often done, and so we can also find ways to recover parts of ourselves in these dynamics if the circumstances don't, show themselves the way that I'm so grateful it did for you, Joss, because it's been an inspiration on itself. But bottom line is, let's look at our lineages.
Hmm.
Let's look at our lineages and. I just came back from a retreat, sitting with elders, learning about earth medicine practices and different indigenous ways. And there's so much talk about ancestors. And even if we have shame that was in our particular lineage, the importance of going and looking at that and forgiving, whether it was ourselves, a family member, like just the restoring right relationship, for taking the time to acknowledge, and if we can, find some forgiveness.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. And people can access that too, like in a letter or a journal. And I, I,
Yes.
I feel like what you just articulated is what happened when I shared my story, with my parents, was that freedom came.
Yeah. Yeah. And we want that for everybody. I really believe that one of the reasons why I'm spending like a year exploring right relationship is because we are so out of whack of right relationship, and it's applicable to every single context, every human being, every culture, industry, like lived experience. It's like, where do you find your alignment? How can you find peace in the past? And, what are the steps that are going to be unique to each person to take to get there? So, Joss, tell us, like, as we start to like bring this conversation to a close, you called your book Claim Your Brain. Just tell us give us the ditty about that.
Hmm. Claim. was like really from reclamation, like reclaim your natural state. And some people really felt like they've never had a healthy natural state or they don't remember it. So claim really captures that perspective for people. And claim your brain specifically because I had the head injury and it was a lot of brain health. I've really tapped into neuroscience and its role in rewiring and how my master's was on neuroinflammation. So inflammation in our brain and where that comes from. And I really wanted to be able to bring that perspective because a lot of our suffering, so whether it's endocrine disorders or heart disease or mental health, it's from inflammation. And so capturing that piece. But for me, the pivotal moment in my story was I literally wanted to take my brain out of my head and trade it in. And that's where I was at my lowest. I'm like, I don't think I have any other options but to ask for a new brain.
Wow.
And so claim your brain and your heart and your gut and your nervous system, but they couldn't make the title that long.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's really what it is really what that means. It's
Yeah.
we have the ability to choose. We get to claim our mental health. And some people don't. So my book is about mild to moderate mental health. And I want to make that disclaimer. So if there's anybody out there suffering in moderate to severe mental health or mental illnesses, schizophrenia or mood disorders, um, that's not this book. This book is really for mild to moderate mental health, mild to moderate levels of anxiety, stress, depression, and burnout. And that's what this book captures because there are mental health professionals out there to help with mental illness on the higher end of the spectrum. And this is written from a mental health and coaching perspective.
Um, we'll put all this in the show notes, but just tell us where people can access the book and where they can access you because you're doing talks on all of the incredible things you've shared today and other topics as well. So if people want to work with you and buy the book, please point us.
Mhm. So the website is truliving.ca. So truliving.ca. And on that website, you can access our LinkedIn, our Instagram. You can access the book pre order, and the book order is right embedded in the website right now. And you can reach me at Jocelyn Pepe on LinkedIn as well. So happy to hear from any of our viewers. And I'm doing a lot of work right now in the corporate setting around mental health and performance in the workplace, and also, working with moms and navigating, the mental health journeys of motherhood.
Jocelyn has brilliant work to support your organization to navigate well-being in the workplace, mental health. And she's a model of being the most exceptional, present, conscious mother and to three beautiful little human beings who may or may not listen to this, but we love you, you three little cuties. And Joss, just with some like final places to point us, what is your wish, your prayer for all of us, for humanity in this moment as it relates to mental health and right relationship?
Hmm. My prayer for humanity is to look within. So take a moment, and whether it's one step or 10 steps, take a moment to look within and acknowledge where you're at. So that micro piece. And then also take a moment and go outwards. So in the book, we talk about the inside out perspective of mental health because there's the top down, which is our thoughts, the bottom up, which is our emotions, the outside in, which is how we're impacted from external forces. And then we've added the inside out because the research shows that the more we can give and volunteer and support and help and listen to another human being in their suffering, we actually thrive. So my bottom line is my prayer for humanity is that we get to a place where we all can have an opportunity to share a little bit of ourselves from the inside out and have that positive ripple effect in the world.
And so it is. And a final prayer for you, Jossie Bean. Now looking back on this past, not just decade, but your life, and you've put it so beautifully in this book. What is your prayer for yourself in this moment, or your acknowledgement? You choose, like a prayer, an acknowledgement. Let's go with acknowledgement. I just saw you light up with that one. What do you want to acknowledge in you in this moment?
I appreciate my steadfastness to this mission. I appreciate my I have a vision and I know and I have a feeling and I see it very clearly and I appreciate my loyalty and dedication and commitment to living this through and truly living the answer to like this big question that I throw out sometimes when we're talking about that big picture and getting yourself out there in the workplace is, what do you want your legacy to be? And I want to be known to have had a positive impact on the quality of life of humanity.
And that, my sister, you certainly do. Thank you for coming and being on this season and sharing your gifts and your medicine with us again so beautifully, so intelligently, so groundedly. And may this book, as it's launched today, may it get to the people that it's going to really, really serve them. And may organizations bring you in to be having this important conversation. And may all the babies thrive and grow well and continue to be healthy. And may you continue to thrive in your mission and inspire the rest of us as you do so. I love you, Joss.
I love you, Chris. Thank you.
Thank you, my girl.